Hey, welcome to episode 200. Welcome to episode 200 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. Yes, Awkwardly Awesome Podcast has made it to episode 200. I'm your host, Jason Freeman, and And I want to start by taking you back to the year 1900. According to the website Appalachian Trail Conservancy in 1900, Brendan McKay looked south from the treetops on Stratton Mountain and wondered about a trail that ran all the way to the southern Appalachians. My guests today have benefited from his curiosity 120 some years later. How's that for a teaser? I'll tell you more in a sec, but first, this.
Today's guest, Steve Oak Jackson and Deanna Hypsy Gypsy Salazar.
Well, welcome back to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. Let me tell you about my amazing guest today. The Appalachian Trail in its entirety is 2,197.4 miles long. This is something an explorer like me has a pipe dream of doing, hiking the whole thing. But Og and his wife Hypsy actually did it. Their sense of adventure, work, and dedication are epic. 2,200 miles is a long way to travel by plane, train, or automobile, let alone hiking and camping each night. I'm excited to live vicariously through Og and Hypsy's journey in our 200th episode. I'm eager to hear their stories of the trail, to learn some of the things they gained an understanding overall on their journey, and to discover how it's affected their lives since they completed the exceptionally long trek. Please help me welcome to the Awkwardly Awesome Podcast, Og and Hypsy.
Hey.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being on Awkwardly Awesome Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for that intro. That was really beautiful. Just hearing you talk about it brought me to a little bit of tears, because sometimes take for granted what an epic journey it really was.
I'm excited to get into the journey and how you persisted, not only in thinking of hey, we want to hike the Appalachian Trail, but actually following through and not just doing a little bit and going, well, this is challenging, and quitting, but you did the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But first, I want to go back in time to when you two were little kiddos. If I had known you as kids, where would you have? Where did you grow up? Hypsy?
I actually grew up here in San Diego, and in National City area, which is sort of South County, San Diego. And I went to school out in Point Loma.
You
Got
went to Point Loma Nazarene?
No, this was an elementary school
Oh,
that was a magnet school.
oh
So
wow.
we were bussed out from National City to like Point Loma OB area every morning. So yeah,
So
I would
how
say,
long of a bus ride did you have?
oh gosh, probably about an hour each way, easy. I don't, when you're a kid, it takes forever, but yeah, I would probably say about an hour at least each way. So we were on the bus a lot, me and my sisters, but I was introduced to hiking the very first time in my life, at least from what I can remember, when I was in third grade by my third grade teacher, appropriately named Mr. Green. He was all about the outdoors and took us on a hike up Cowles Mountain. And I remember like looking up at that mountain and thinking that it was just a hill. I was like, I can run up that. And of course, it was like much longer of a journey than I anticipated in my like 8, 9 year old head. But yeah, my family occasionally went camping, never hikers at all. I mean, maybe there was the occasional like nature walk, but it wasn't in any of my family to do something kind of crazy like that.
So,
And
fascinating.
yeah,
How about you, Oak? Where do you grow up?
So I was born in South San Francisco, up in the Bay Area. And when I was 5, my family moved into a house in a little town called Pacifica, which is right on the coast, above Half Moon Bay, below San Francisco. And I loved that town growing up there. It had kind of a small town feel, lots of trees, lots of nature, being right by the ocean. And there was a park in the back of the town called San Pedro, where I would actually take a lot of hikes with my granny, who spent a lot of time watching me, taking care of me when I was younger. And so those were some of my earliest nature experiences, walking with her. And we'd usually go in the evening so we could see the deer coming out, sometimes coyotes. And but also, like Hypsy's family, my mom and dad, we went camping a few times, but limited experiences. The one that I can remember is it actually ended with a close encounter with a skunk late at night,
Oh.
and having to be rushed out. I was little, maybe like 4 years old, so I just remember we were driving fast.
So did you guys get sprayed?
Yeah, apparently. So we
Oh
were in
wow.
urgent need of a shower.
Wow. 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 That's quite the early camping experience.
Yeah, it's something.
One other question, did your granny like being outdoors a lot?
Oh, yeah, very much. She's always been very active and just very connected to nature. She and my grandpa, for their vacations, they would go to Yosemite, the redwoods. She loved big trees and taking care of her garden and having rocks and crystals around and
Mm,
lots of little animals and
mm,
stuff. So she grew
mm,
up on a farm when she was little, so she's always had that sense about her.
mm. So Hypsy, if I had asked you at 7 or 8 what the word adventure meant to you, what would you have thought of?
yeah, it would totally be going somewhere completely new and wild, definitely immersed in deep woods. Being a desert girl and growing up in a very urban area, anything with a lot of trees just definitely fascinated me. And I wanted to just, there was something magical about it. So I grew up in a large apartment complex as a kid. And so there wasn't a ton of like nature, but my sisters and I were always outside and climbing the trees. And I just felt at home amongst some of the pine trees that were in that area. And would just wonder about like far off areas. When I was a kid, like all the things that fascinated me were, fantasy, the far off adventures, like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all of those fun, like far off magical, what's the Chronicles of Narnia. Yeah, those kinds of things were just so fascinating to me. Yeah, so
That's awesome that kids are so resourceful. You found the tree. You're living in a city in an apartment complex, and as kids you find the trees, and you start playing in the trees. It's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, there were these flowers that grew on these pretty common bushes. Actually, you don't know what kind of bush they are, but they grow along the freeways here. And we would take the pine needles that were super long, and we'd string flowers through them and make ourselves little flower crowns. And we'd dig in the dirt and collect snails and get in trouble with bees, and all kinds of cool stuff. So, so yeah, being outside definitely made me feel at home, and like a little piece of that magic was there.
Even in the city, you found a little piece of that magic.
Yep. I remember hanging out behind particular bushes that had moss growing alongside of them, which I thought was like uber magical because it just didn't seem to be around a lot. But yeah, it was.
How about was going to the ocean part of your childhood?
Remarkably not often. Again, like we'd go to the beach once in a while, but however, going to a school that was very close to the ocean, I got a lot more exposure than I did with my family, for example. There were tide pool visits and visits to the beach. I remember when I was really young, going to the bay, the boardwalks. It wasn't until I was a teenager or adult that I was out there much, much more, enjoying all of these wonderful places in San Diego, the beach, the mountains, the desert.
How about you, Og? If I had asked you at age 7 or 8 what images came to mind when you thought of adventure, what would you have said?
Adventure for me at that age was usually in books. I was doing a fair amount of reading already at that point, just being immersed in fantasy adventures and my imagination. I would often spend a lot of time out in the garden or around the house with like my army men and my soldiers. My dad is like a military buff, and so we would play GI Joes, and I'd have all my guys like set up in the bushes. And sometimes I'd go on adventures where I would get my backpack and I'd fill it up with supplies, and by that I mean Snickers and Sweet Tarts and all the different candy,
The important supplies.
Right. The whole food pyramid. And then I would
The whole food pyramid.
and then just hang out in the bushes and basically eat my rations, and it's like
Your ration.
and then when the sun's going down, it's like, okay, mission accomplished, time to go back inside, I guess.
Nice.
So yeah,
nice.
a lot of imagination, a lot of fantasy. Where I grew up, there actually weren't a lot of kids around me in the neighborhood. So I think that just encouraged me to go deeper within myself and my imagination and kind of creating my own adventures.
Interesting, fascinating. So I don't even know that I just met you today, Hypsy Gypsy, and I met you in person once, Oak, and we've communicated by text. So did you both meet before the hike, or did you meet on the hike?
Before, yeah.
Yeah, we met before the hike. We met in 2006. At that time, we were both going to school at San Diego State, and we were actually both working at the same place, Lowe's, the home improvement store. I was in outside garden, and Hypsy was in the inside garden section. And over the course of a summer, we just got to know each other better. And yeah.
You know, I never thought about it, but we were both drawn to the outside portion of the store, the garden area, you know? So it's like, you know, it like we just merged at one point, but yeah, we met before in school and we got married.
Oh, so you didn't meet at Lowe's.
We met at Lowe's, yeah. And we
So,
happened to be going to school together as well.
So once we knew,
but that was a coincidence,
Yeah,
right?
total coincidence, yeah.
So what drew you both to the garden section of Lowe's?
for me, it was, I just wanted to be outside in the sun and the fresh air. And, you know, if I'm going to be at a place like that doing retail, it was nice to be around the plants. We really loved the manager who was there at the time. His name's Johnny Dollar. Shout out Johnny Dollar.
Oh my gosh, what a great name,
I
Johnny
know,
Dollar.
right?
And, you know, fast forward a few years, but we actually asked him to be our officiant when we got married. So he married us. And so, yeah, that's part of the story. But yeah, just connecting through the garden. And,
Were you into plants before that, Oak, or not really?
I've always been into plants to some extent, but actually these past few years, now that we're at a place where we have a garden, I've been learning a lot more. And that's something that we're both interested in. You know, talk about pipe dreams. One of the things for us looking ahead is eventually finding maybe a little piece of land where we can have kind of our own homestead and grow more things. And that's a vision that, you know, is tied into the experience that we had on the Appalachian Trail and being outdoors and learning about tiny homes for the first time. And yeah, just getting curious about alternative paths.
How about you, Hypsy? What drew you to the plant section at Lowe's?
So the department that I worked in was more of like, you know, barbecues, patio furniture, pest control, indoor plants, seeds, things like that, landscaping materials. So I did learn a little bit, but it really didn't interest me at the time, to be honest. It was just like a job. But I really enjoyed working there. The people there, like, it just had a good vibe with the folks that I worked around. Just feeling a lot of high energy being in college, meeting a wonderful man at the time. It was just, yeah, just great. But now that I look back, I'm like, like I was in like some kind of training. I look at every experience in my life now as some kind of training for something now or in the future. And so it was the universe trying to reach out to me and tell me that I was going to need some gardening skills or some outdoor knowledge to some extent. So as Oak mentioned, being more involved with gardening now and understanding how to grow things and being regenerative with the earth and mindful of how we use our resources. So yeah, it was definitely like a prep in a strange way, and we were both drawn to it too. So it was like another sign from the universe that all these things are kind of coming out at us if we just pay attention.
Wow. Did you get married before hiking the trail? Or?
Yeah. So we met in 2006, started dating, and then 3 years later, Oak proposed to me. And then 2 years after that, we got married. So that was in 2011. And we had graduated college by then. Oak graduated in 07. I graduated in 08. And that was about the time that you proposed to me. And then we were kind of like in like marriage mode, saving money for our wedding. And it was a very outdoorsy wedding. We had a barefoot party, and my dad was like really against it. He was like, I'm going to wear flip-flops. I can't be barefoot. But like we had this beautiful garden wedding that was totally hippie dippy nature esque that we totally loved. And as Oak mentioned, our friend Johnny Dollar married us. And yeah, that was like other signs that nature was calling us, or that was definitely a strong part of our personality.
So I mentioned at the beginning that the man Brent and so on.
Yes.
That what's his name?
I'm not gonna remember, but basically like the grandfathers of our trail, yeah, of the AT.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I his name was Brendan McKay.
Brandon McKay, yeah, there it is.
Brendan. I mentioned that he looked south from a mountain and envisioned the trail. When did the vision of hiking the trail come to first come to both of you?
I think Oak found a YouTube video or something on it.
You were just looking on YouTube?
I forget, but we found like a documentary or a video about it, and I was just like, people do this? Like, I want to do that. Like, I just want to like walk for a really long time. And I don't remember the name of the documentary or.
No, I think it might have been a German documentary about the Appalachian Trail, and I guess it was our first time, yeah, just being exposed to something like that. Like, that's something that people can do, that we could do if we wanted to, like, put our minds to it. And
So Oak, were you literally just surfing on YouTube and you found this video?
literally just surfing, and then out of the universe pops this video, and we're intrigued. And it occurred at a time when we were actually really hungry for something different, because by that time, okay, we've been married and we had moved from Lowe's to a more corporate job. And so we're doing the commute, work in the office, and to be honest, it wasn't feeding our souls. And it got us to a place where we just like weren't feeling as good about things. Like, we didn't have our friends around us from when we were working at Lowe's or when we were in school. We felt a little bit isolated, I think, and
Were you still in the San Diego area?
still in the San Diego area. Yeah.
How long had you been working the corporate job?
I had been there just over a year. And I think you were there a little longer.
By the time we started hiking the trail, I was there for like 4 years. Yeah, just doing totally like this adult thing that we thought we had to do. Like, graduated college, it's like, all right, let me go get this job. And yeah, it just kind of like just made us feel very disconnected from life. And we had watched that particular documentary just before we got married, kind of logged it away in the back of our mind, but it inspired us to do more hiking. So we started going hiking with friends more. And it was actually our best man and our maid of honor that encouraged us to do some hiking with them. And then we just kind of like ran with it and started doing more of it, getting inspired by that. That brought us happiness and balance with the corporate world. So having, a little bit more time in nature and outdoors was important.
So at the time you were like doing corporate during the week, but hiking on the weekends and kind of coming into balance that way.
Yeah. And so after we got married, we were just like, okay, what's next? We can't do, like, we just knew it wasn't in us to, like, I just remember this particular conversation we had. I remember it was around Christmas time, and we're both like just distraught with the way our lives are. We're like, okay, we got married. All our attention was on planning that. And now it's like all our life is ahead of us. What do we want to do? Do we want to continue down this path? Definitely doesn't feel right. And we just knew that there was something not being tapped into. And I don't know, I guess at some point we just like talked about doing the trail, and we're like, we're doing it. Like, once we decided that we were going to do it, it was like maybe a few months, I think within 6 months after we got married, we're like, okay, we're getting rid of our apartment. We're like, that's a whole story in and of itself too, how we planned, to how we prepped for the trail. But within 6 months after being married, we like got rid of everything pretty much that we owned and was living out of a van to see if we could actually do with like discomfort, basically, and if we could do something crazy like that. And it was to help save up money so we didn't have rent anymore.
Correct.
So
few questions here.
Mhm.
So how did you decide? So the PCT runs from Mexico to Canada, right?
Mhm.
How did you decide between doing that and doing the Appalachian Trail?
I love this story, and Oak tells it well. So
Okay, so funny thing, but we had no idea the PCT existed until we were.
And first of all, what for people who don't know, what is the PCT?
So the Pacific Crest Trail is another long distance trail that's sort of a cousin to the Appalachian Trail. Whereas the Appalachian Trail runs from Georgia up to Maine on the east coast. Here on the west coast, the Pacific Crest Trail goes from the border with Mexico right up to the border of Canada, going over the Sierra Mountains. It's about 2,500 miles.
2650.
2652. Sorry.
To be precise.
To be precise. And yeah, even with the hiking that we were doing here in San Diego in preparation for the Appalachian Trail, it just wasn't on our radar. So it wasn't until we were on the Appalachian Trail in Tennessee, we're staying at a hostel, and we meet this couple that's running the hostel, Chuck Norris and
I think her name was
Tigger.
Yeah, and Chuck Norris, and it was in North Carolina Hot Springs.
His name was Chuck Norris.
And so we're hanging out with them, and they started talking about this trail, and they're like, wait, you're from San Diego and you don't know about the Pacific Crest Trail? You just decided to come out here for your first trail? And
Yeah.
we're like, yeah. So we ended up watching a documentary of the Pacific Crest Trail while we're on the Appalachian Trail.
It was kind of embarrassing, yeah, because we didn't even know what was in our backyard. Because the trail literally starts an hour drive east of here in Campo. So yeah, but the universe wanted us to go farther away from home, I feel. So I had never been on the East Coast. Neither one of us have ever been on the East Coast before then. And it felt wild. It felt like that feeling like I described as being a kid, like going into the woods. Like I'm going into the woods. And yeah, get a little choked up about it because it's pretty awesome. But yeah, we did it.
I love the story of you not knowing about the Pacific Coast Trail because it's not like these trails are like Vegas or something with big neon signs
Yeah.
and it's just not they're not talked about that much in the Appalachian more, but
Yeah, actually, there was a book that came out in 2013. Well, there was a friend of ours reading a book about the PCT while we were on the AT, and it was called Wild. And I believe the movie came out about that time, and it has Reese Witherspoon in it, and it just made the trail blow up after that point. So even in 2013, the trail was still pretty, the PCT anyway, was still pretty, like, not secret, but it was a gem, sort of a hidden gem. And the movie kind of put it on the map, and then it like blew up to needing a whole like stringent permit system and so forth. It's like getting concert tickets. You know, you have to like wait for the computer for the door to be opened, and but anyway, yeah.
So then so you decide the corporate jobs that you don't want to follow that path, and then you have the 6-month period of transitioning from living in an apartment to living in a van. What were those 6 months like?
It was all learning. We were doing a lot of. it actually, like, I remember what felt good was just having less and letting go of things and just having more time to focus on practicing our hiking. And coincidentally, that's also about the time that we started going to Pilgrimage of the Heart as well. That also sprang out of being at these corporate jobs and looking for something more. And we found out about these free meditations that they would have at the studio on the Tuesday evenings. And that's how we met Sujantra and came to Pilgrimage for the first time. And so it was also at the same time that we're preparing for the Appalachian Trail, we were also taking the first steps on like this spiritual journey that we had no idea was right around the corner, but like with the yoga and the meditation and that whole world too.
Yeah, big shout out to our family. They really helped us to prepare. We actually had a conversation with my Aunt Susie and her husband at the time and my dad, because they all lived in the same house, and asked them if we could live in their backyard in a tent and use their crawl space as basically a storage area for our things. So like that's where we would get like changes of clothes, because at this point we were still doing the corporate job, but we had high plans to hightail it out of there. And so they really showed up for us and let us store our things at their place. We still paid them rent, but it was a very nominal amount of money, you know, and helped them with, you know, whatever they needed around the house. And my dad has a van, a big Econoline van, an old 90s Econoline van. And he offered it up to us to sleep in instead of camping in the backyard. And that taught us how to be more minimal, as Oak was saying, doing with less. And it was so freeing just to not have to look at your crap, you know? So, and downsizing and purging and just really just needing, you know, it was like a lovingly weird way, probably an awkwardly awesome way to minimize and prep for the trail. And throughout that time, we were also like practicing backpacking. So we just put weight in our backpacks and go do, you know, like a few different hikes back to back. Like one day we went and hiked Iron Mountain, and then we did Mount Woodson, and together those were like about 13 miles. And so we're like, okay, this is gonna be about our mileage on the trail, so we can do this. And so yeah, we kind of prepped in that way. It saved us a ton of money. And yeah, within 6 months, we were ready to cut the cord and take off. And we successfully saved up 20 grand in 6 months. And that was back in 2012 and the beginning of 2013. So the spring of 13 is when we embarked.
Spring of 13. Did you, so before we leave San Diego, which of you wants to talk about the magic that is Pilgrimage of the Heart?
Well, it has lifted me out of really dark places. Showing up and doing meditation and, you know, sort of not being sure if you're doing it right, but still knowing that like there's some magic happening. Like it got me through these difficult times of having to stick with the corporate job while we prepared to leave, because it was still about 1.5 years before we actually left San Diego. So after we got married, basically it was about 1.5 years. And it inspired us to take up a home practice. Pilgrimage showed us and gave us the courage to see that we can do so much more and that we have so much more potential. It instilled courage, and it helped us to release a lot of fear that we had, a lot of preconceived assumptions about what we should be doing with our lives. It helped us to rewrite our programming, I'd say, is probably the most precise way of saying it.
And that was just before we went on the Appalachian Trail, it was mostly just going to the meditation classes. But skipping ahead a little bit, when we came back to San Diego after the Appalachian Trail, it also helped with the integration process and finding focus again. That's when we both got into the asana, the movement practice more. I got Hypsy, the 2-week special there. She's telling me how great it is, and I need to come start taking classes. And then we started meeting the beautiful teachers there and developing our own practice and going deep with that. So it's kind of funny how it was there to prepare us a little bit for the trail, like to bring us balance and preparation for it, but then also coming back from the trail, it's called pilgrimage of the heart. We had a pilgrimage on the trail, and now we're on this pilgrimage of the heart, and it's always been there for us. And now we're actually both teachers there, so the trail just keeps evolving, so to speak.
Amazing.
Yeah. So.
Huge shout out to Sudan Trail and all the teachers at Pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Shout out Pilgrimage.
It truly is a sanctuary.
It's beautiful. Last question before we talk trail. How did you get from San Diego to the start of the trail?
Pretty easy. As Hypsy said, we sold everything, and at this point we have our backpacks, and what we have is in our backpacks, so we get on a plane.
Oh God, you didn't take the econo van out too?
No. We were done with the van at that point. Landed in Georgia, and we were only there for a hot minute. I think we had just enough time to have some very poor quality Mexican food, and
we should have known better. I mean, we're from San Diego. We're trying to get Mexican food in Atlanta.
I don't know. Yeah. And then from there, we jumped on a train that took us to Dahlonega. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is towards the top of the state. And from there, there was a hostel where hikers who were preparing to embark on the trail, you could stay there the night before, have a nice hot meal in the morning, and then they would take you to the trailhead in a van all together. That way you could start with some other people, and yeah.
So you've taken the van from the hostel. What was your first day on the trail like?
So our first day, the trail begins proper at the top of Springer Mountain, but there's an alternate trail that we opted to take. I think it added a few extra miles.
Yeah, Amicalola Falls. It's very popular for people to start there because it's a beautiful hike, and I think they call it the approach trail to the actual start of the trail. And that is like, I don't know, 8 or 9 miles if I remember right.
I love it. You start off this thousands of mile hike by adding mileage onto your hike. That's awesome.
We're like, when's the next time we're gonna be out here? Like, we have to seize it, And we made friends right away on the trail. And I remember feeling pretty good. We kind of kind of cheated because we packed out Subway sandwiches and that was our first lunch on the trail. And
we're gonna ease into things.
Yeah, in hindsight, we really had no idea what we were getting into. But
no, even with all the preparation we did,
yeah.
There's nothing that prepares you for the experience itself other than the experience. Yeah.
So you're hiking thousands of miles, but you're not only walking that far, you're in charge of finding shelter for yourselves, creating shelter, making food, getting enough to eat.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like having so much responsibility towards sustaining yourself in a primitive way. Oh, in a different way.
Yeah, well, it didn't feel like that much responsibility, to be honest. If anything, it felt much more simpler and a lot of clarity. We're not worried about dates so much. To an extent, we needed to be mindful of our pace. If we were going to finish the trail, we couldn't dawdle too long or take too many side trips, but
we kept a budget too. Like I was in charge of our budget, like seeing how much we were spending.
yeah. But so far as the nitty gritty of having enough food and making it forward, it's pretty easy, like once you get into the rhythm of it. And at the time, the technology, like with phones, was fairly new. So we actually relied on a paper guidebook that was very popular at the time. And so we knew a little bit about where the places we were going if we wanted to look ahead. But the trail itself was always very well marked, so we didn't have to worry about navigation. There's a fair amount of people on it, so it never felt too isolating. But just, yeah, I don't know. It's part of the charm of the trail is just that simple routine of wake up, pack the tent, pack the bags, have a little food, start walking, take a break, meet some people, go a little bit further, and then before you know it, it's time to set camp again. And you just do that day over day over day, and all the magic happens in between those other things, but there's actually a lot less responsibility involved than we have here in the city in a lot of ways.
How are you getting food each day?
Yeah, so on the Appalachian Trail, there's a fair amount of places where you can resupply along the way. So seldom would you go longer than 3 to 4 days without passing by near somewhere where you could find food. And as far as the quality of the food, it could be a little suspect at times. You'd be in some places where the best you can do is resupplying out of a gas station. So it's like, all right, here we go. Ho-hos and snowballs and Snicker bars.
Yeah.
That's back to your rations
Correct.
when you were a kid.
Yeah, the proper rations. All you need is sugar to keep going.
I would often say that, like, what we eat out here is like a kid's dream. Like, we were eating literally like Snicker tacos and
candy tacos. You get a flour tortilla,
peanut butter,
scoop of peanut butter, maybe some M&Ms for a little texture and color.
Yeah, and you just, or like anything that you had that would be good to put in it. Like, it was calories is what we needed. But our guidebook that Oak referred to was written by a fellow named AWOL, and his guidebook was quite popular. And we would use that to plan, okay, this is the section we're going to be hiking. We're going to need about 4 to 5 days of food before our next food supply. And the map would indicate, like, okay, is this a town? What kind of food options are available? Are there restaurants nearby? Are there accommodations where we could do laundry, rest up? Our little trail stops. The longest portion was in Maine. It was the 100-mile wilderness where we had to carry food for about 8 days. But that was the longest stretch. It's pretty populated on the AT. So yeah, oh my gosh, so many stories come to mind as we're just like talking about this stuff. I mean, I could talk about it all day. But yeah, it was fun. I mean, like, I remember in New Jersey, like, literally the trail went alongside a deli. And we're like, well, we have to go in there and like go get something to eat. And yeah, and there's trail magic sometimes. So that's trail or backpacker lingo, where in the middle of the woods, you would just come across a huge cooler of treats and refreshing.
What?
Yeah, and there's pictures of us, like, like celebrating because we came across like a whole cooler of things. And
so people just leave stuff.
Yep. Or you'd come across a water crossing and somebody would put, some sodas or some beers in the ice cold stream, and you would just pick it out and take it with you. And so yeah, there was a lot of that. Sometimes we'd show up to a shelter and there was trail magic happening. There was like trail angels putting on whole barbecues. Or we'd get to a road. I remember there was this one time we were in Virginia and we had like 7 miles to hike that particular morning to make it to town. And when you get to town, man, all you have on your mind is food. And we're coming down these switchbacks to get down to the main road to hitchhike in. And I can smell grilled onions and they just smell like amazing. And I'm like, let there be trail magic. Let there be trail magic. Let there be trail magic. We get to the bottom and sure enough, there is a trail angel doing a barbecue out of his tailgate, serving up all kinds of different things. And he gave us a ride into town too. So we like gorged on all kinds of goodies and then went into town and ate some more. Like it just, yeah, we're burning so many calories a day, just, or we're like garbage disposals.
Yeah, can't eat enough.
So a few more technical questions before we talk more about the spiritual side. What are you doing for water?
So that same guidebook that we were describing would tell you your water sources, and it would describe how reliable that water source is, especially during a particular time of the year. So we could rely on that. I think it was incredibly rare that we arrived at a water source that wasn't flowing if it said it should have been at that time. But there were never any scary moments where we're like, oh my gosh, we're going to run out of water. And on the AT, we went through a few different methods. So we started off with what was called a steri pen, and it's got the UV light, and you swish it around in the water, and that cleansed the water. So we would use a bandana just to get the debris out, and it would basically kill whatever's in there. That was like the cleanest way to do it. But the technology back then, that little pen just needed like these odd batteries that were hard to find, and they were expensive. So about, I don't know, a quarter way into the trail, we switched our system to, what was it called? Aquamira, which is droplets that you use to clean your water that taste kind of chemically. So then we ultimately went to a Sawyer squeeze, which is a charcoal, like a classic charcoal filter. And you'd use one plastic bottle with all the dirty water, squeeze it into a clean bottle, and that's basically what we did for the rest of the trail. And then I think we had a few other methods. Natural spring water would come out of the earth and we wouldn't have to filter that. That was just the most delicious water on earth. Always cool and refreshing.
Yeah. Overall, water was pretty plentiful on the Appalachian Trail. And the year that we hiked it was one of the rainiest years, I think, in quite a while. I don't think there was a week that went by that we didn't get rained on at least once.
Yep.
So you mentioned getting rained on. How do you deal with that in terms of wet clothes and?
No. Yeah, you just keep going. You need a change of socks, I'll tell you that much. We always had a dry set of clothes that we'd keep in our backpack that we would wear exclusively for sleeping. So even on the coldest, wettest day, at the end of it, you have something warm and dry to change into. We had really good luck with our tent. You know, it never got flooded out.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's not true.
Wait, did we get flooded?
Yes. There was one time we were camping alongside a river and it was raining and we like kind of camped in this divot and we woke up to a pool.
Yeah. It was basically like a water bed.
Yeah, it was like a water bed underneath us and we're like, so we've had some experiences, but nothing like dangerous where we're like, we may get hypothermia. The rainiest part of the trail was during the late spring and summer, so it was warm. So I remember hiking when it was raining in my sports bra and shorts. And it was never like super duper cold for the most part. There were some when we got into the Whites in New Hampshire, but overall, it was just so wet and rainy all the time that, as long as we had like dry socks. So what we would typically do is hang up our clothes inside our tent overnight for them to dry as much as possible. But there were mornings we'd wake up and have to put wet clothes back on. So, and then when you do that, like you have no choice. We basically have 2 sets of clothes, and you want to keep your nighttime clothes dry. So you have to put your wet clothes back on in the morning. It sucks, man. And so you just do it really fast, and then you get moving right away, like Oak was saying, and you warm up.
That was my least favorite part, Jason, the wet socks.
Yeah.
Especially in the beginning of the trail, there was snow on the ground in Georgia when we started, and it was quite cold. So there were mornings where you'd wake up and your socks are just standing straight up, and you got to beat them over a rock, beat them into submission before you can even put them on.
Yeah, we would start fires in the morning to warm up our shoes and our socks, and yeah, there were definitely moments like that. So we got smart, at some point in, and we're like, okay, we're gonna carry like 3 or 4 pairs of socks, because at least if you can start off, your feet might get wet right away, but at least if you can put on dry socks, it's much easier than putting on shivering cold socks. And we would hang them on the outsides of our backpacks as we were hiking, so hopefully by like midway through the day they were dry, and then we could stuff them back inside, and then have another pair dirty but dry socks.
What month did you start and what month did you end the hike?
So we started March 27th in Georgia, and we ended October 27th in Maine. So.
And then how many miles did you get in the routine of hiking a day?
Typical for us would be 12 to 15, up to 18 in some areas, and just varied more by terrain. When we get into New Hampshire, Maine, it got pretty rugged, so it was natural to slow down a little bit. And then there were places that were relatively flat, like going through Maryland and parts of Virginia, where we could go a little bit faster, but I'd say about 15 miles on average.
Yeah, and I wanted to correct what I said. We started March 27th and ended October 9th. I'm confusing a different trail. But yeah, so we started off pretty strong, I'd say. We probably started off between like 10 and 12 miles a day. That was a challenge for us. There's a lot of elevation gain and loss on the AT daily. And then probably midway through, like Oak was saying, we probably racked up more mileage, like 15 to 18 miles. Then toward the end, it definitely got more, you were in bigger mountain ranges, so it probably slowed down. I remember one day we only did like 8 miles or something. It was really slow going, kind of like hand over hand rock climbing, which was a lot of fun, but just like slow going.
Yeah, the Appalachian Trail, they call it a trail, but parts of it you're literally climbing up ladders or scrambling down rocks.
There's an arrow that points up, and you're like, that's the trail. Like, we just have to find a way up there, and you're just like hanging on to branches and roots and stuff to like scale the side of this rock or whatever it is. Yeah.
So we could talk about this for hours. It's so fascinating. So what has completing the trail given both of you? Or the experience of the trail, I guess.
Well, first of all, it was, we did it. Like, we made it. We like projected it, manifested it, did it, got there. So a sense of like that whole adventure arc, like from not knowing what we were doing to becoming these seasoned hikers, these machines by the end of it, and like being able to accomplish a really big goal like that was really big for us. Friends that we're still in contact with all these years later. A whole shift in our perspective in what's possible and how much do we need, which spun off into these aspirations of like us wanting to find a tiny home at some point and to find a little homestead and just live closer to the earth. I mean, in so many ways. What would you say?
It's like yoga, like what you were saying earlier. It was a spiritual journey, and it's given me courage. It's given me more faith in myself. It's restored my faith in humanity. The kindness of strangers along the way was just immense. The beautiful souls and friendships that you make on the trail was just astounding to me. It gave me a greater sense of hope for myself and the whole world. I often like to say it ruined me in the best way. I can never, like, after that, I could never look at life the same way. There's just so much out there, so much beauty. And as Oak mentioned, showing us that we can be happy and content with less, and that we were happy and content with whatever we could carry on our backs. And being happy with what you have and finding more gratitude for the things that we perhaps took for granted, like a shower or a toilet, you know, or the availability of food, comforts. And it's so much more, but it's definitely given us, like, lit our fire in the best way. And has inspired us to go after for whatever we want in our lives. And our lives have become infinitely better since the trail. I mean, since meeting this man, my life has gotten infinitely better. But the trail, like, definitely sparked a flame that wasn't there before. And
can you imagine can you both imagine if you had been talking about hiking the Appalachian Trail and somehow talked yourself out of it?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
I mean, can you imagine, like, if so many people have great ideas, like, let's go hike the Appalachian Trail, but can you imagine if instead of doing it, and if you had instead taken the path of talking yourself out of doing it?
Yeah, I've thought about that, and anytime I thought about quitting on the trail, I would think about that alternative, and I would get disgusted, and that gave me the strength to keep going. And, like, sometimes I do imagine that, and yeah, I'm just glad it's not a reality in this reality. Yeah, it's
So in regards to the Appalachian Trail, like, no, like, I think part of the energy, like, that made it happen was, like, not doing it simply wasn't an option. I mean, we were blessed to have the resources to make it happen, but once we were on the trail, it's a matter of, like, our will to just keep going, even though some of the days were hard. You know, the trail humbles you in so many ways. The nature, the weather, the soreness of wearing that backpack for so long and feeling like your shoulders are going to fall off of you, and you got mosquitoes attacking you, swarms of mosquitoes, and the ticks. My goodness, the ticks. We haven't even talked about tick checks yet. Talk about things that bring you closer together as a couple.
yeah, we got real familiar with you know, the freckles and things on our bodies.
Freckles that shouldn't be moving.
Yeah. It definitely made us more intimate in a lot of ways that I don't think we would have been otherwise. And hiking it as a couple is definitely a whole nother, I feel like, podcast, you know, because a lot of people embark in this journey with friends or alone or make friends along the way, but as a couple. And we've known other couples on the trail and how that dynamic manifested for them on trail. And yeah, the whole trail is just so inspiring, and it's turned us on to continue a life like that, you know, where we went on to do other hikes and live minimally and be van dwellers. And pursue being yoga teachers, something that we thought was really far-fetched. So yeah, man, like there's just so much to talk about in regards to backpacking.
That can be definitely around two of this conversation at some point if you guys are interested. It's fascinating.
Oh,
But for now, I ask all my guests this. I talk in my and what I do about the power of doing our imperfect best. And what I mean by that for me is I envision my best that I want for myself and to give out to people, and I go for it. And then when mistakes and obstacles come up, instead of being stopped by them, I try to learn from them and move forward. What does doing your imperfect best mean for each of you?
I think for me, it's kind of how you described moving through the journey, being okay with the mistakes or the downtimes or the darkness, the difficult bits, or the uncomfortable parts, and seeing what I have to learn from those and honoring it for its own beauty. And being okay with it. Having always that self-love that it's like, okay, like, you know, I tripped up this time, but next time I'm just going to be a little bit more aware. I'm going to do a little bit better. And finding that balance so as to not just use it as like sort of a crutch or something that can turn into complacency. But definitely being okay with, you know, the light and the dark, the up and the down, the good and the bad, quote unquote. It's all a part of the journey. It's all a part of the journey.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. How about you, Oak?
I was thinking of it just now as like always moving forward. Even if you have to take step back sometimes, like you continue to go forward and like follow what feels good and what feels exciting, and like leaning into like the light and just showing up and shining as best we can. And there are dark days for sure, and that's part of the healing journey as well. We might have to get to it on the next conversation, but after the Appalachian Trail, when we came back to San Diego, it was a real shock to the system, like coming back to the city and the noise.
I can't imagine.
Being kept up at night by the buzz of the fridge, just, you know, things we weren't really prepared for. And so
they call it the post-trail blues.
The post-trail blues.
So being able to heal together through that and being there for each other, and that's when we got really deep into our yoga practice. And at the time, all we could think about was hiking more. So we actually spent the next 2 years at that point saving up so that we could go do the Pacific Crest Trail. So we actually hiked that trail in 2018.
So you've done the whole.
Spoiler alert! See, this will be the second podcast.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! We could talk for the next 5 hours. Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Your vision for what you wanted to do is incredible, and then you actually did it, and you learned from it, and now you're on this amazing journey. Thank you both for being who you are.
Yeah, thank you for being you.
Thank you for being a part of it too.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I just literally have talked to Oak in person like for 10 minutes before this podcast. I had never met Hypsy Gypsy until today. But it's the story is so inspiring, and there's going to be more conversations probably on Outwardly Awesome podcast. Times like this, I'm so inspired to remind us all, like say hi to new people. If you see something you're curious about them, ask a curious, gentle question and see where a conversation will lead. You're a wonderful person and they're wonderful. The bridge is going to be talking and getting to know each other. I know at first we can be kind of shy and kind of hesitant, but to have conversations builds connection, create inspiration, creates amazing stories. Anyway, I could go on and on, but thanks for tuning into this episode of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. Please tune in next week. And as always, we love comments. Thanks for leaving comments if you're inspired. And thanks for being you. You are the